because you take something where you might have felt powerless, and what you learned from it and the person you become from it kind of becomes your power. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope that everyone is doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I wanted to talk about therapy and share some life-changing things that I've learned from going to therapy. I feel there are still a lot of really wrong ideas about what it means to go to therapy, why people choose to go to therapy in general. And so I would love to talk about this topic some more generally, because after the many hours of therapy that I've done, I've really seen so much value in it. And there are so many things that I've been able to learn from it. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. Some life-changing things that I've learned from going to therapy. Lesson number 1 is pain and sadness can also be a comfort zone. Ups and downs in life are very normal. I say this very often, but I had one phase in my life where I was really sad and in a lot of pain for quite a long time, just because of events and situations that had happened in my life, mostly stuff that I've never really talked about on here. And so, yeah, I was just really sad, and I had my reasons for that. But at some point, you start seeing that the mind and the body gets used to everything. The minute something starts happening again and again and again, we become used to it, and it becomes a habit. And with that, it also becomes a comfort zone. And so, as contradictory as it might sound, pain and sadness can also become a comfort zone. I remember during that end chunk of time where I was just really sad for a really long time, I had a therapy session, and that day I was really sad. Surprise. And I had my reasons for that, but at the same time, it was no different to the week before that, and the week before that, and the month before that, and the month before that. And so I went into the therapy session, and I expressed what I was feeling. And I remember my therapist said, "Alina, what you're feeling is valid, but we have been here so many times. I think today we need to focus on how you want to move forward and what you can do to feel better. And we need to let this go." I remember when she said that, my first thought was like, excuse me? I was very confused, because I thought, what? She had never said that. She had listened to me being sad for months and months and months, and she had never said that. And I thought, excuse me, like, do you think I'm choosing this? Then I thought, are my reasons not valid? But I realized later that she was right. She said, what you are saying makes sense, and what you're feeling is valid, and you have reasons for why you're feeling what you're feeling. But at the same time, I think you might actually not be as sad as you think you are anymore. But maybe you don't even remember a version of yourself who is not sad about something. And so that's why, because you don't know that version of yourself anymore, that's why you're not able to move out of it. And she was so right, but I could not see that, because I had been sad, let's say, about past events for so long, and I'd been so used to carrying that in some way and always feeling that in every moment, and not knowing how to deal with that. I was just looping in the same thing again and again and again, and it was very harmful for me, and I could not see that, but she was able to see that. I never understood that until I experienced it, because I always thought pain or sadness cannot be a comfort zone, because a comfort zone is supposed to be comfortable, and what I'm feeling right now is very uncomfortable. And so how could this possibly be a comfort zone? But I realized that a comfort zone is not necessarily always comfortable. There are many comfort zones that we as humans stay in, even though they are really, really uncomfortable, just because leaving it might feel scarier than it actually is. And so truly, everything can become a comfort zone, even the things that feel uncomfortable, such as pain, sadness, worry, stress, complaining, like all of these things that don't really feel comfortable, they can still be comfort zones. And I just realized for myself, I don't want pain and sadness to be my comfort zone. That's just something that I don't want, because pain is part of life, but it's also just a part of it. It's not all of it. And so I accept pain as part of life. And when it happens, I'm not going to run away from it, because I can't. But at the same time, I never, ever want pain or sadness to become a habit or a comfort zone for my mind and for my body, because being in that, and I know how it feels, is really, really horrible. And I think, as with any other comfort zone, it takes courage and discipline and focus and wanting to get out of it to get out of it again. But oh my God, so worth it. So worth it, because having pain and sadness be a habit and a comfort zone in a way for the body and for the mind is really, really horrible. And yeah, I just realized I don't want that for I don't want that for myself. Life is way too beautiful, and being alive is way too fun for that to be a comfort zone. I'm not taking that. Okay, the next lesson I learned was seeing my part in situations. So, as I said in a recent podcast episode of mine, I don't think everything that happens in our lives is our fault. And I don't think there's always something that we could have done differently, because some things just happen. But there are moments where we could have done things differently, because we are all just human and none of us are perfect, and we are all learning and growing. And that's a really great thing. But that means none of us do everything perfectly. And that's totally okay and really important in a way. But I've kind of seen that we as humans just love to point the finger at other people. We love to say, this person hurt me, this person broke my trust, this person is immature, this person is doing this wrong, this person rejected me, this person. It's all about that person all the time. And while that is valid in some cases, being in that mindset all the time, always focusing on where the wrongs are in other people and never seeing our own wrongs, I think that's a very, very dangerous mindset to be in, because you can easily fall into a victim mentality, especially if we've had things happen in our lives that have been painful. To go into that mindset, you just start having a victim mentality. And that's a really horrible state to be in, I think. And you just become angry or resentful and bitter. And that's just not a fun life to live. I started realizing this more when I was going through situations in my life where I had experiences with people that were really painful, and maybe what the other person did was not right, and I was not treated the way I think we are supposed to treat each other. And again, valid reasons for that. But at the same time, I felt whenever I would talk to people about it, even if I was sharing the story in a neutral way, it was always like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Oh my God, that's so sad. Oh my God, what exactly did that person do? Oh my God, like all focused on the story and the other person. And even though sometimes I appreciated the compassion and it's nice to feel seen, at some point, when you're always looking at the other person and what that person did, you start feeling horrible, because you're like, okay, so this happened to me. I guess there's nothing I can do now than just be a sad potato for the rest of my life. And this is just it for me because there's nothing I can do. And that's what I really appreciated about therapy, because in that space, it was more like, okay, this happened. Let's look at the pain of it because that's valid. But after we have done that process, we can't just leave it there. Let's also look at your part. And if you could go back now, where would you also do things differently? And you start asking yourself, okay, where would I do things differently now? Where was I maybe also not right in some ways? Where could I have also been kinder? Where could I have also been more honest? Where could I have put more boundaries? Where could I have been more compassionate? Where was I maybe also the toxic one in some ways? Just seeing our own mistakes also. And there might be a situation where 90% was on you, and you can look at those 90%, and then there was maybe another situation where 0.01% was on you, but you can still look at that. And it's always empowering to look at that little percentage or big percentage where we also carry some of the responsibility. And for me, it was really important to understand that I'm not going back there and seeing what I would do differently, because back then I was a worse version of myself, and that's why I deserved what happened. And now I need to be better. And so these are the things that I need to do differently. No, not at all, because it's actually the opposite. You go back and you take something that was painful maybe, and you see where you would do things differently also now, because that means you take something that was painful and you see how it made you a clearer, stronger, kinder, whatever version of yourself, a better version of yourself, because you take something where you might have felt powerless, and what you learned from it and the person you become from it kind of becomes your power. I think it's so important to have people in our lives who reflect back to us where we also have blind spots and where we might also still have to or want to grow, because that's so normal. Like, that's so human to have flaws and to make mistakes, and it's not a weakness. It's rather very, very normal, and there's so much growth that can come from seeing those parts. And I don't think it's healthy to only be surrounded by people who are always just making us feel better and always on our sides and always saying we're doing everything perfect, because I've had so many moments in therapy where I felt offended or I felt cornered because I was having something reflected back to me that I could not see. And that's the first reaction you get. But later on, I was so grateful for having someone reflect that back to me. And I saw how much growth comes from going on that journey. And I find therapy is a really good way to explore that, because you know that the person who is reflecting something back to you, if you're working with the right person, does not have any bad intentions. They are coming from a neutral perspective, and they're saying what they're saying because they want to help you, not because they want to put you down. And so for me, really important to have a space like that that is safe and protected, but still really, really important. Sometimes we also need to look at where we might also not be doing everything right. And that's very, very important. And I feel maybe nowadays not enough people do that, because we've become very sensitive with how we talk. And it's almost like we just want to make people feel better all the time. But sometimes you also just need to look at your own stuff. So yeah. The next lesson is looking at my childhood and seeing the links that it creates today. I feel like nowadays everyone is saying everything goes back to your childhood. It's all connected to your childhood. And I really never saw it. I thought I was a kid. Like, how can that impact the person that I am today so much? But at some point I realized, yeah, I think everyone is right. Our childhood and our family structures really do impact the people that we become later on in life. I started that process much later in my therapy journey, but going on that journey, I guess, really opened a lot of doors for me, and I started seeing a lot of things that I could not see before. And I've had moments where in therapy I would be really fixated on something that I thought was the problem for something, or something was making me upset or triggering me or whatever. And in my head, it was very clear that whatever I was fixated on was the reason for why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And then in therapy, whenever it would make sense, it would be linked back to something from my childhood or early years or family structures. And a lot of the times in the beginning, I couldn't see it because I thought this is a very, very different situation. I don't get what this has to do with my childhood. And it was almost like, can we stop talking about my childhood? Because this is really important and I really need to sort this out. And I don't think this is anything to do with anything that you're saying. But then after a while, I started realizing that that was true. And often whatever I was fixated on would then later either entirely evaporate or just have a completely different meaning because I realized what it was linked to. And for me, there was a lot of freedom that came from that process. I did an interview or a podcast episode a couple of months ago with a therapist on my channel. And I remember we were talking about heightened emotions. So any moment where whatever we are feeling is heightened and it logically or rationally doesn't make sense when it comes to what the situation actually is. So something happens, it might affect us, but our reaction to it is much louder than what that situation would actually call for. Whenever that happens, it mostly comes from wounding. That's what she was explaining. And wounding meaning there's something from our past, something that we have not looked at, and that's why we are reacting the way we are. And very often that point comes from childhood. And yeah, for me, a very interesting journey to go on. I know that not everyone agrees with it. Some people think our childhood doesn't affect us today. I can just speak from my own experience. And for me, it really, as I said, opened up a lot of doors for me. And there were a lot of things that I started understanding that I could not understand before. It's an interesting journey to go on, but for me was really, really, really helpful. I did a poll on my Instagram asking, have you gone to therapy? Yes or no? 50% said yes, 50% said no. And then the people who said no, I was asking them if they would like to go to therapy someday. And almost everyone said yes. And so clearly, this is something that many people are interested in. A lot of people are in therapy. More and more people are talking about it. I think it's really great. But at the same time, I've realized I think there are still too many wrong ideas about what therapy is, why people choose to go to therapy, and all of that. It's just very mixed up. I've seen people use therapy as an insult. So let's say someone does something that doesn't suit them, and then the response will be, well, you should really go to therapy because there's clearly something wrong with you. Or let's say I have expressed that I'm going to therapy to someone, and the reaction will be really shocked and worried and almost like, oh my God, how badly have you gone off the rails that you need to go to therapy? And I've often found it really uncomfortable to say that I'm going to therapy because I just didn't want to hear the responses. I've also had people say, well, know that I'm going to therapy, and then use that as an insult against me. So let's say I do something, it doesn't suit the person, and then it will be like, well, I already should have known because you are in therapy, which means there is already something wrong with you. So never mind. It's just really, really messed up. And I think it's just so outdated to think like that. I think it's really important to understand that just because someone is going to therapy, it does not equal that there is something wrong with that person. It just means that that person is looking to take responsibility for their life and they value a neutral opinion. That's literally it. There can be 1,000 different reasons as to why someone takes such a choice. And it does not mean that the people who are not going to therapy are not taking responsibility for their life, or that the ones that are going, that there's something wrong with them. I think it's just really, really outdated to think like that. I also had a conversation once with someone who said, why would you go to therapy? Like, that's such an unnecessary thing to do. Just focus on the good in life and live your life. Like, it's really not that hard. And you don't always need to find a problem about everything, kind of implying that going to therapy means that you're always focusing on the negative. And I find that an interesting point of view, but for me, the contradiction in that is that through going on such a journey through going on such a journey of self-discovery as therapy, I feel I've been able to create more love and happiness and joy and lightness in my life than I've ever had. And so, yeah, for me, those things also have not been the case. Of course, it's also a privilege. Not everyone has access to go to therapy, even if they would want to go. I was not able to go for a really long time. And so that has to be taken into account as well. And it's also really important, if you do want to go, to find someone who you click with. That can also be a difficult process sometimes. But I think once that is established, for me, therapy has really been a really great tool to become a better version of myself, for myself, and also for the people in my life. It's not always easy. It's really not always easy. It's a commitment. But for me, the rewards that have come from that have been so great. All right, that is all I wanted to share for today. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry, my brain is freezing. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a beautiful morning, evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you so much. And I am looking forward to connecting with you in my next episode.